TradeSquare is Australia's first business-to-business marketplace connecting people, brands and organisations into this diverse ecosystem in a unique global landscape. Through pivoting, transforming and reshaping, Australian businesses have an opportunity to create the model for the future that aligns with the world's needs and leveraging the power of a collaborative approach. Through the TradeSquare podcast, we will bring together dynamic, diverse and thought-provoking leaders from business, government and organisations to have conversations to further enable new thinking for the future. Welcome to TradeSquare. I'm Catherine Van der Meulen, and joining us today is Rob Hillard, the Chief Transformation Officer at Deloitte and Chairman of the Australian Information Industry Association, where we are going to be exploring enabling business growth through digital transformation. How are you?
Catherine, very good indeed, and thank you for the invitation.
We are excited to unpack your world and all the things that you are truly passionate about. But before we get into those, tell us, who is Rob Hillard?
That's an interesting question because we're all multifaceted. But I suppose I'm someone who is passionate about technology and particularly about the ability for technology to contribute to a better world, a better society, a better planet, and better business for all of our benefits. But I'm also a realist on the challenges. So I believe that there's work to be done to make sure that we achieve that better outcome. But I'm an optimist that it is more likely than not if we all contribute.
Can you unpack a little bit further the variable views of you being an optimist and you being a realist in this environment and also with this very interesting landscape of the world that we are living in 2020?
Well, that's right. 2020 has certainly been an interesting year, and it's stretched and grown our digital muscles and the digital muscles of everybody from primary school through to aged care. I am incredibly optimistic about that acceleration, the fact that people have gained these digital muscles, because I believe that the best way to navigate change is to have knowledge and skill. The realist part of me says that we can't just assume that if we do nothing, technology will always be good. I mean, we know more and more about the risks of social media. We know more and more about the risks of privacy creep. We know more and more about the risks of cyber. But at the same time, what 2020 has taught us is the opportunity, the inclusion opportunity of being able to have people, the best people able to access the best jobs wherever they are. The opportunity for people to be able to combine more effectively their work and home lives. The opportunity for us to be able to gain productivity without necessarily having to give away more of ourselves. I mean, these are really good things. And then we look at the acceleration of some of society's most important things, the ability for, we've learned how to do education remotely. We've learned how to do remote health, telehealth, in a way that we have struggled for years to achieve. And if we can leverage those benefits, then there's huge growth, not just in our economy, but there's huge growth for each of us personally.
And so can you share a little bit more about your role at Deloitte and also the AAAA, the Australian Information Industry Association?
So I've been with Deloitte for many years and had a variety of roles, ranging from being the managing partner of Deloitte Consulting through to serving on Deloitte's global board. My current role is as Chief Transformation Officer for Deloitte Asia Pacific. And in each of those roles, again, I've sought to ensure that Deloitte is making a big contribution in that future world, in a world that is possible if the optimist is combined with the realist, and we sure we navigate to the better future. One of the tools for that in maximising the benefit of technology are industry associations. So many years ago, I signed Deloitte up to the Australian Information Industry Association and am a big advocate for making sure that we not only try as individual organisations to navigate this technology future, but we do it together, because a vibrant technology ecosystem enables Australia to be able to more effectively navigate that digital future for the better future. And I must admit, I'm very proud at the moment to have had the opportunity to be elected to the boards and to be elected by the boards as chair. That is an enormous privilege. It's one that a number of people have had over the years. The AAAA is now 40 years old, and as a custodian for a period of time in that role, I feel a tremendous sense of both duty and excitement of being able to help the AAAA to navigate that future.
And as you touched on before, obviously 2020 has been that year of tech, that year of digital transformation, and thinking about those things that you mentioned around kind of education and health particularly. What are some of the other examples that you've seen this year of Australian businesses kind of underpinning their foundations through technology and through digital transformation?
There's been, even more than probably visible, a shift to using technology in new and productive ways. So we've had the obvious examples. For years, we've seen retail gradually going more and more digital. This year has just seen it rocket and accelerate. And so many retailers have made the shift to be able to productively integrate their physical offerings with their digital offerings. What we've also seen is supply chains move far more digital. So again, because so many organisations have had disruptions to their supply chains, they've needed to be able to find alternative suppliers or monitor their supply chain more effectively and integrate with their suppliers dynamically. So we've seen that shift. It's one of the things that's really driven the shift to cloud. So it's not only about digital transformation, it's about where organisations effectively work in much closer partnership. So rather than transactional arrangements, they're coming up with much more predictive and intimate relationships, B2B, which in turn provide an enormous set of productivity, enormous productivity boost. We're seeing confidence for digital to move physical. In that, what we're seeing is, we've talked for a long time about the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, where manufacturing through to agriculture becomes far more digital, uses physical sensors, advanced manufacturing techniques, additive manufacturing techniques. And these things, again, have accelerated this year through necessity. And those are benefits that we're just not going to go back on. And then we've seen many professions that have worked to leverage digital accelerate dramatically. And education and health are two really good examples where, through necessity, we have seen rapid acceleration in their use of technology. And again, we're not going back. Can you just imagine, while we had to have all kids learning from home across the country at various times, in the future, when you've got a child who has a long-term illness, or for some reason is unable to attend school, the inclusive opportunity for them not to fall behind on their learning is absolutely tremendous. When you've got brilliant teachers who have a particular niche expertise, their ability to be able to share that expertise more widely, because again, we've got better at using digital channels, is going to provide a boon, an absolute huge accelerator to education in the 21st century. So I think there's tremendous to build on what we've learned this year.
So in a recent white paper written by the AAAA, by industry experts, building Australia's digital future in a post-COVID world, which I absolutely, truly, I did love reading it all and all the depths of it. What were some of the standout recommendations being made to the digital task force under the Prime Minister's cabinet that you were really proud of, or that you thought were really insightful?
I think that one of the most important things that came out of that white paper and also came out of a lot of conversations is the importance of investing not just in digital for its own sake, but investing in digital infrastructure. That's the infrastructure that's going to set us up for the future. So if we've learned how to do things, whether it be in logistics, for supply chain, be it in education, be it in health, be it in cyber, that we then go on further and we establish infrastructure to make it the norm. And the balance you have to strike in doing that is you want to have a competitive market that will encourage innovation, but you want to do it in an environment where you have standards and you effectively have a functioning market initially. And for that, you need governance, you need a structure that is going to encourage that sort of behaviour. And again, the white paper provided a number of recommendations to support that, and there was some very strong and positive response, all tiers of government, to doing that. And you also need to target your investments in such a way, just like you target to build roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, which are physical infrastructure. You need to target to build the digital infrastructure that all of the innovation can run on the top of. Because just because you build the road doesn't mean that you need to own the buses and cars and trucks that run on it. But you certainly want to provide that common infrastructure that they're going to use. And you want to set the direction that they're all going to drive on the same side of the road.
That'd be a good start, wouldn't it? I want to dig into the digital infrastructure a little bit more because it's something of interest to TradeSquare particularly. Can you share a bit more about what the digital infrastructure looks like in Australia at the moment and where the gaps might be in that digital infrastructure for where we're kind of growing in that digital economy for the future?
Well, let's take a few examples. So we've seen the move to telehealth. That is where we're receiving services from our medical professionals electronically rather than going in person. Tremendously convenient and something that has been sought for some time, but only a tiny fraction of them are actually being done with video right at the moment. Most of them have been done over telephone, and that's disappointing. I think it showed me how far we have come when my 81-year-old mother, who at the start of the year had never used the camera on her laptop, by the end of the year is completely comfortable on Skype and Zoom and Teams. And she was disappointed when she had a telehealth appointment and she couldn't get a doctor to come online to do that. I think that we need to make it as easy for health appointments to be done online in a similar way between practitioners while keeping the innovation of different providers and different technologies in play. Similarly, in education, we've seen lots of different schools use different approaches to the technology and a myriad of different technologies, which is good. That's a positive thing because we want to see that innovation, but we have not seen enough common infrastructure just so there's some base standards on how education online is done. Think about, for instance, things like curriculum. We have we have our established free-to-air broadcasters who have obligations on their local content, but we don't have the same thing in a digitally delivered curriculum, which means you don't necessarily guarantee that you're getting all of the same support materials. That will evolve over time, but a lot of that actually sits on top of digital infrastructure, which I think will be extremely valuable. Same thing applies in logistics. We have no hesitation in saying ports are an infrastructure, and we have requirements will operate, and a lot of infrastructure that supports the ports is private, and a lot of it is public. And some of it is public infrastructure in the same way as our supply chains of the future, particularly as we see the move to more autonomous capability is going to need to be a common digital infrastructure, much of which we can establish the foundations for now. And finally, cyber. You cannot have a functioning and successful digital economy if people are living in fear. We're very used to having police and army in our world as a common part of the background, almost the infrastructure on which our society functions on. Well, the same thing needs to happen digitally. We need to have security that is as ubiquitous against crime as the police and as ubiquitous against any interference internationally as our military. And it shouldn't be something that is intrusive. It should be something that is completely supportive.
And a bit of a seamless journey to that as well. And I'm sure this year you've seen a number of organisations and the truth of those organisations, their pain points coming through. What are some of those that you have been able to support with the solutions that Deloitte has that have really kind of addressed those new pain points, I guess, because those pain points may be different to what the pain points were of 2019 or 2018?
Well, that's right. I think that one of the interesting challenges of making a move into a digital world is that the further you go in, the more that you have to lose your real world metaphors. Whenever we look, as humans, whenever we do something new, we tend to still keep the language of the past. So imagine, when you do a mortgage document online, we still talk about it being a document. We still talk about it being a form, and we still do a signature, even though these are physical metaphors that we're applying in a digital world. They're by no means the most efficient. And we're already starting to see some of those metaphors get replaced with more efficient mechanisms. But then it gets even more interesting, because as you move organizations to work on the cloud, it's not just about moving their data center online. It's about actually moving potentially the business in a way that the natural borders of where that business is, what that business did, may not make any sense anymore. It's why we've seen so many retailers integrate the logistics functions and partner quite differently with their logistics providers. It's why we're seeing them work differently from a payments perspective. Potentially what we're seeing is their suppliers become an integral part of the customer experience. So it's quite a different experience. I think if 2020 has done one thing, it said that don't assume that your year 2000 business model still applies for the 2020s, that the organizations you partner with in the past should just be partners, and often with transactional contracts. Rather, they may be well and truly inside your walls, and it may well be that you should take over part of their business, or they should take over part of yours. In other words, you quite literally transform. And one of the first trigger points for this, which really started the emergency, was the move of over half of Australian workers to work from home. And that was the move where they suddenly had to pick up and work from home, and the technology they'd used in the office and the paper they'd used in the office wasn't necessarily available. And organisations had to rapidly transform. And in doing that, they haven't looked back. It's potentially been a complete turnaround of the way that they fundamentally operate.
And so thinking about now and for the future, what do you think economic freedom looks like in Australia in 2020 and moving forward to 21?
Economic freedom, that's an interesting phrase. I think that the economy is going to be freed up to work differently, but with new boundaries and barriers in there. That we know that the 2020s face new trade challenges between nations. We are definitely entering a period of uncertainty. I actually don't think a period of downturn. I think it's a period of uncertainty. Until we get a vaccine for COVID-19, we won't know for sure that every part of the world that we trade with has fully recovered and won't have a disruption. That disrupts trade. We know that there's going to be a lot of debt that nations are navigating, and again, potentially that's going to create some different behaviours. We know there will be changes to tax, and that will create some behaviours. And we do have the potential for further trade wars and disruption, or trade sanctions of various kinds that will come and go. And again, what we're seeing is that organisations that have given themselves the maximum digital freedom, the most degrees of freedom in the way that they operate, are going to be able to adapt and adjust, not only to be able to survive those sorts of changes, but to be able to thrive in them, to be able to actually take advantage of disruption, knowing that any problem they face is also being faced by the competitors, and it's who can move the fastest who's going to potentially get the greatest benefit. And out of those constraints, come whole new innovations.
And I think in that period of uncertainty that we may be progressing into, that can really only lead to opportunities. And, you know, you've explored a number of those and how organisations can really not only survive, but also thrive with those new opportunities that actually present themselves in this new world that we are living in. So thank you, Rob, so much for sharing your world with TradeSquare.
Thank you for the invitation.
For more information on TradeSquare, head to www.tradesquare.com.au and support Australian business economic recovery and growth with a collaborative approach to the future of business.